Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to a brand new video and a series of videos coming up for the month. We're going to be working on some nostalgic childhood memories book journals. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, subscribe, turn on that little notifications bell, and make sure to set to all so you receive all of our notifications. So I am super excited to announce that this month we're going to be starting Mystery Vintage Book Nostalgic Childhood Memories Edition kits in my Etsy shop. When you purchase one of these kits, you'll receive a charming vintage children's hardcover book along with your choice of 5, 10, or 15 fishbowl pulls. Now, each fishbowl pull will contain a variety of crafting treasures, perfect for your own unique childhood memories book or journal. So to make this experience even more special, we're going to film the entire experience for each pull for our YouTube stories, so that way you can see and others can see the unique items that you're going to receive in your kit. So over the past few months, I have been collecting lots of items for this project. I've been planning this project for about 3 months now. And in that time, I've collected tons of vintage papers, vintage ephemera, and I've also been able to get my hands on a very large number of these really fun vintage hardcover children's storybooks. Now, obviously I can't use them all myself, so that's why I wanted to offer them up as a kit for you guys in my Etsy shop. So if you want to go ahead and craft along this month with us and make a vintage memory children's journal, go ahead and click the link in the description below. You can head over to my Etsy shop. It will give you the option to choose between either 5, 10, or 15 fishbowl pulls, and the fishbowl pulls will be all of the items and accessories that you will be able to use when creating your own custom vintage nostalgic childhood memory book. All right, guys, so let's get started with this tutorial. So just like everybody else that's going to be involved in this little fun journal event, I don't know what journal I'm going to get that I'm going to have to work with. So I'm going to be picking from our little fishbowl here, or our little jar, so that I'll know what journal I'm going to, or what children's book I'm going to turn into a journal. So let's see which one I'll get. All right, which one is it going to be? I've got one in my hand right now. Let's look together. And it's going to be number 3, East of the Sun, West of the Moon. All right, let's see which one is it. Number 3, East of the Sun, West of the Moon. It's gonna be this one right here. This is the little children's book that I am gonna be using to start our journal with. So first I wanna mention that all of these books that I have, all of these vintage children's books, are far from perfect. They all have imperfections. They all have some pages that are ripped or torn. They all have spots or marks on them. These are not new books. These are vintage books. They have some discoloring. So I was perfectly fine with using these for journals, as they are not in perfect condition, but they're still very usable to create a journal with. All right, so basically we're gonna start out, since this is like a beginner-friendly tutorial, we're gonna start out showing you how to take these apart so that you can prep them to make a journal of your own. Now, I'm actually going to remove all of the pages on the inside of my front and back cover, because I wanna use this cover for my actual journal. So I'm gonna start with using a little razor blade knife like I have right here, and I'm gonna open up my front cover. I'm gonna pull out my little tag that I put on here so that I knew what book was what. And I'm gonna take my little crafting knife, and I'm just going to cut right down along the seam of the spine, and you can see the pages are gonna come out very easily because they are kind of glued to this little backer piece like this. So I'm going to do that on the front and the back cover. All right, so now we have all of our pages removed. They're still all together. I'm probably going to be using a few of these in the actual journal itself. I love the front and back cover pages as well. They're really cool ephemera pages. So I'll definitely be using a lot of these, maybe some of the ones with the pictures on them. I'll pull out the ones that I like. There's actually a cool colored picture right on the inside front cover. But we're going to be using a lot of these, so just set these aside for now. Okay, so now we have our front and back cover, and we have a spine attached also. So you can use this as is if you would like. Because these books are old, this spine really needs reinforcing. So I'm actually just going to take it off completely, and we're gonna put a new spine on with some fabric, and we'll use this spine for something else like a bookmark or some other piece of ephemera for our journal. Okay, so you can use scissors. I like to use these little craft knives. You can get these at the Dollar Tree for $1. I also like to use a metal-edged ruler for this because you get a nice straight cut. You can use a cutting tool or something like that as well, but I find that if you're trying to remove this spine right here, sometimes it's hard to get your cutting tool placed in the right spot. So that's why I'm just using my craft knife, and I'm just gonna line my metal ruler right up against the edge of that front cover, and we're just going to make a cut. We're going to pull that front cover right off. It should cut off really easily. All right, so now we have a front cover, and we're going to do the exact same thing to the back cover. So here's the front and back cover to our new vintage children's memory book. All right, so now that we have the covers all cut and ready to go, we need to make a spine. So for the spine, I like to use cereal boxes or food box packaging. For my spine on this book, I just happen to have these ice cream cone this ice cream cone box, which I really like the ice cream cones anyhow. Like the look of it was very kind of nostalgic. So I saved this box, and it ended up working out perfectly because I'm going to use the edges or the sides of the box for the spine of my journal book. So I cut these sides off of my box. And so you can use any type of lightweight cardstock or chipboard that you want. For this particular book, I'm gonna do a 2-inch spine. So these are a little bit wider than the 2 inches. These are almost 2.5. So I'm gonna cut these down just a little bit. And I'm actually going to use both sides to the box, and I'm going to glue them together just to make it a little bit thicker and a little bit more sturdy for holding in our signatures for our journal. Now, our signatures is basically a grouping of pages that go inside your journal book. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim these down. I'm actually going to use my cutter for this. I'll pull out my cutter. And I want to trim these down. First, I'm gonna just trim off these little flaps at the bottom and the top. So we're just gonna cut these off so that we have a nice, clean, straight piece of cardboard to work with. And then I'm gonna cut my strips down to 2 inches. So now I have a 2-inch strip, and I'm going to do the same for the other one. And like I said, if you don't have a cutter, you can always use scissors for this, or you can use your straight edge and knife. All right, so now I have 2 pieces that are 2 inches wide. Now, I don't know about the length yet, so we're going to use our cover as a guide for our length, just so that we know we have the exact right size. Now these are very close. I'm gonna take a little pen, and I'm gonna use this side right here. We'll line this piece of cardboard right up with our book cover. We're gonna make a little mark, and we're gonna do the same for the other one. Line it up, make a little mark, and then we'll just cut that piece off. So now we'll have the right length for our book spine. Okay, now, if you watched any of my other videos, you will know that Fabrifix is my favorite glue. I use this for crafting all the time. I especially use it whenever I'm doing paper crafting. I didn't put my cover on, I just left my needle in it, so there's a little bit of dried glue around the cap. Always keep your cover on it, and or keep a needle in it so that it stays, so that the air doesn't get in this, because this will dry out very quickly. All right, so we are going to just glue these two pieces together. And I'm using, again, my Fabrifix. I will link this in the description of the video. Like I mentioned, this is my favorite glue that I always use for crafting. So I'm gonna go all around the edges. And be generous with this, because you don't want this spine to fall apart. You want your spine to be nice and sturdy. This is gonna be what's holding your entire journal book together. All right, so I'm placing the craft side together with the craft side, so that way the printed side is on the outside. I do it for a couple of reasons. The craft side seems to stick better because it's a little bit rougher, so it will stick better to itself if you're gluing them together. All right, so we're just gonna hold that together. So now we have our spine, and it's nice and thick but still flexible, which is what we want. Every journal book is going to come with a few things in addition to your crafting item pulls that you're going to get. Now the pulls will vary depending on the number of the amount that you purchase. There'll be either 5, 10, or 15 pulls. But in addition to those pulls, those are going to be like accessories. In addition to those pulls, every journal book is going to come with a few things. It's going to come with a coordinating fabric, and it's going to come with an assortment of pages and ephemera. Now every book will be different, but you're going to get enough to at least get you started. Now you probably also want to include some things that you have of your own. You can always use book pages that you have of your own. You can use newspaper, you can use magazines, you can collect anything really, any type of paper item you can use for pages for your book. But I'm going to try to include a good amount of them, so that way it will at least get you started. So for this particular book, I chose this vintage fabric right here because I thought the color was going to work perfectly with the book that I picked. Now I didn't know ahead of time what book I was going to pick because I literally just picked it with you right here. So I had a few different fabrics set aside that I could use. So I chose this one right here. I've used this fabric in another project, but I really loved the colors. I think they are going to coordinate well with the cover of my journal book. And this is a vintage fabric. So like I said, every book will come with a coordinating fabric that you can use for your spine. All right, so now we're going to attach the spine to our front and back cover. So how I like to do it is I like to start out with using some type of masking tape. This is a drafting tape. I ended up finding this at the Goodwill bins, but this has like little reinforcements in it. But just regular masking tape would work fine. You could even use duct tape. Anything that's a flexible kind of tape you can use to tape this together to at least hold it to get you started. So I am going to line my pages up. I'm making sure they're really straight. So I'm using the guides on my mat here just to line my two covers along with the spine up. And I'm keeping a little bit of space in between the actual front and back cover from the spine. Probably not quite 1/4 of an inch, but maybe like 1/8 of an inch or so. You don't need a huge big space, but you want enough space so that when you open and close your journal, you'll have space and it won't rub against the spine. So then I am just taking a strip of my tape and I'm going to just lay it right across and push it down just to hold that in place. And then I will just rip it off, and I'm literally just kind of taping it right to my mat here. If you don't have a mat, that's fine. Just make sure you're using some sort of a straight line so that you know your book is straight. And you also want to make sure that your top and bottom is lined up with your journal spine as well. Looks a little bit off. Let me try that again. It's okay if you make a mistake, just go back and retry it. Just want it as straight as possible. All right, now I'm leaving these little tails for a reason. You'll see in just a minute. But I like to use my bone folder to go in and really push that tape right down into my covers. All right, so now we're gonna kind of pull this whole thing up. It should be stuck together. And I'm gonna flip it around and we'll flip our tails, our tape tails, right over to the other side. And this will give like a good reinforcement to hold that spine on. Now I'm gonna do the same thing on the front like I did on the back. I always start on the inside and then I do my final piece on the outside because I don't want that tape bump, if you would. You'll see what I mean by when I say tape bump. But I want a nice smooth surface, which I'm actually covering up these pieces right here with another smooth piece of tape. So I want it to be nice and smooth on the outside, more so than the inside. It doesn't really matter. You can't really tell the difference when you're, you know, adding your fabric cover later on. But again, I'm just gonna take my bone folder and just push that right down. All right, and then we'll pull this up and we'll wrap it around the inside just like we did on the front. And this is what I mean by tape bump. Where that tape seam comes down, I'd rather have that seam be on the inside. And it's not even really a bump, but I know it's a bump. So I just rather have that be on the inside where you can't see it or feel it as opposed to the outside. Okay, so there is my spine. It is attached. And again, I'm taking my bone folder and I'm just like rubbing down the edges where the book is gonna fold. So there is my spine. So for this next part, where we're gonna be attaching the fabric. Now, each one of the books will also come with a coordinating fabric, like I mentioned. We're gonna be attaching the fabric strip to the spine, just like such. But what I like to do is I like to lay down a piece of wax paper on my surface because this can get a little bit messy. I'm using Mod Podge, just the matte Mod Podge. I use this for lots of different crafting techniques, but I'm going to use a sponge. And also don't be afraid to use your fingers because you're gonna need a good amount of this. Don't be afraid of it. I use a lot of it when I'm doing my spines. And this does dry clear. Just want to get it off there. This does dry clear. So yeah, don't be afraid to use a good amount of this. So I am just applying this right over my spine and my tape, paying careful consideration to the edges. I want to have a lot on the edges. And like I said, if it goes over the edge, that's fine. We're going to be covering this up anyhow with some sort of a trim. But I just want to make sure the edges and all the seams, and especially along the seam of the spine and the front cover, make sure you have plenty of Mod Podge in that area. All right, now when you have it good and covered, then let me get my sponge cleaned off here. Then you can take your fabric strip and you can lay it right down carefully, trying to make it as even as possible, right down into that Mod Podge. And this is where I use my fingers. I make sure the edges are pressed down really well. And you can even go over some of the edges with your finger, kind of pulling that Mod Podge over the top. Like I said, this will harden and dry clear. You just want all those edges glued down really good. And those edges, also you could take your bone folder and just run it along the edge or the corners, just so that that fabric is sitting into that corner really nicely. All right, so this is why I like the wax paper, because this will stick to your surface. flip it around, and we're going to do the same thing on the inside. We're going to generously apply your Mod Podge right to the inside of your spine. Again, paying attention to this top portion where it covers and the bottom portion. And like I said, don't worry if you go over the edge on the inside, completely fine. This will dry and it will just help create a better, sturdier spine for your journal. All right, then you're gonna pull one side up and push that right down into the Mod Podge and pull your other side down. Now where it overlaps, you're gonna wanna also put a little bit of Mod Podge. My neighbors are doing construction on their kitchen and they're outside. I hear their table saw right now. So that's what you hear in the background. All right, so just make sure that is down. Everything is pushed in nicely. Again, you can kind of go over the edges with more Mod Podge if you want to, just so that you know they are sealed down nicely. I kind of like to just go over my edges, especially on the inside of the book. Sometimes when you're opening and closing it, those edges can come unsealed. So let's just make sure that they are going to stick really well. All right, so now once this is down nice and firm and tight, we want to let this dry. So I'm again going along my spine, just pushing it out. I'm going to let this dry. I'm going to peel it off of my wax paper. I'm going to set it upright and I'm going to just let that dry for a good couple of hours.